This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Connecticut continues to face a waste crisis. Growing volumes of trash and a lack of local places to dump it are leading to rising disposal costs and a waste system under strain. One of our guests today calls this a silent crisis. And today, we're going to do a little bit more thinking about what happens to the trash after it hits the barrel. We'll explore how hunger and waste continue to exist side by side and what's being done to fix that. Joining us now is Katie Dykes, Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Commissioner. Commissioner, welcome to Where We Live.
Great to be with you.
Or I should say welcome back to Where We Live.
Thanks for having me.
And for our listeners, let us know if your town's trying something new to reduce waste and how it's going. Or if you have new ideas on how to do that, we would love to know. Give us a call, 888-720-9677. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Or you can also email us your ideas at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. So, Commissioner, I want to start big here and broader. Let us know, how is Connecticut's waste crisis growing, and what does this picture look like today compared to maybe even just a few years ago?
Yeah, so the big news a few years ago is that a major waste incinerator that was located in Hartford closed its doors after decades of operation. It was an antiquated facility, and when it closed, that meant that over 50 towns that were relying on that facility to manage their waste had to find new places to send their trash. And so today, about 40% of what we throw away in Connecticut is being exported by rail or truck to communities to the far away from us, Pennsylvania, Ohio, where that trash is put into landfills. We have been working with municipalities, with the legislature for many years on looking for a new path forward to regain self-sufficiency in how we manage our waste. That's really important because when we have to pay the cost of disposing of our trash. For a lot of towns, that's embedded into your property tax bill. So bringing down the cost of living, making it more affordable to live in Connecticut includes finding more sustainable ways to manage our trash. There's a tip fee that towns are paying to manage that disposal. Those tip fees, especially for towns that used to rely on the Hartford facility, have increased from about $60-$70 per ton several years ago to now some towns are seeing new contracts at $120-$130 per ton. The good news is there are solutions that can help us take control of our waste, provide for more in-state solutions, and they happen to be more compatible with a sustainable future. And those include helping support more recycling and getting really valuable material out of the waste stream. And when I say valuable material, I'm referring to things like food scraps, which they're heavy and wet. So they're expensive to transport, but they can also be repurposed and recycled into compost, into energy sources. And we have businesses that are growing right here in Connecticut to help manage that material.
Well, we'll talk more throughout this conversation about how far food scraps can go in terms of those things that you just mentioned that we can use them for. And because you mentioned sustainability and also sort of in-state solutions, because you and Governor Ledmont recently announced funding in the form of grants to 18 municipalities
Yes.
and regional organizations. So this is a part of the second round of DEEP's Sustainable Materials Management Program. So can you tell us more about this effort?
Yeah. So look, the solution for getting these recyclables and food scraps out of the waste stream looks different depending on what community you're in. For some rural communities, it could mean having a compost or a food scrap drop-off location at a transfer station. In some of our cities, we see curbside collection that's been really popular. And our goal at DEEP has been to meet municipalities where they are and to provide funding support for communities that want to innovate new solutions to help manage their waste. So just recently, we announced $7.5 million in grant awards to 18 municipalities and regional organizations. It's been exciting to see some collections of towns working together. And they're doing lots of different things. They're creating unit-based pricing programs. They're creating satellite food scrap drop-off units where you can bring your food scraps. They're doing co-collection programs where you have different colored bags, orange for trash, green for food scraps, that you separate at home and then put in your same trash cart that you use and wheel it out to the curb. Those are, lots of different approaches, and they're all showing great promise and success, and we're excited to be able to support them.
Well, you mentioned self-sufficiency earlier, too, and I want to talk about that in terms of when it comes to managing our own waste. Now, how much of what we throw away actually stays within our state borders?
Right. So this varies town by town. Some towns have contracts where they're continuing to send their material to in-state waste energy facilities, and then roughly 40% of our tonnage is being exported out of state, and that's really remarkable when you think about it. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. This is a big food holiday. And as you think about those leftovers, if you're sliding them into your trash bin, you may be sending them on a journey to Ohio, Pennsylvania, communities really far away from us. In the near term, that can be a cost-effective option for towns, but in the long term, we're really putting a lot of our trust on those communities far away from us to want to continue to accept our waste.
Right. And this idea of hauling waste away, far away, just to get rid of it, the idea is so wild to me sometimes. It's like, and because we are talking about sort of finances as well, and you mentioned earlier that a lot of these fees comes in the form we pay them through taxes, and so I want to talk about the money involved here as well. What are the financial strains placed on cities and towns to deal with trash, and how do residents end up footing the bill?
Sure. So, different towns have different contracts that are in place. Some are still on contracts that were signed several years ago, so they haven't seen those price increases yet. Other communities are starting to see, as they're signing new contracts, that those costs are going up. And as more and more communities, this is not just a Connecticut issue. We see lots of, our neighboring states are also running out of places to put their trash. And so that's just putting more pressure on these prices. So, if you think about it, throwing food scraps out as trash costs about 60% more than diverting those food scraps to in-state facilities. We have an anaerobic digester down in Southington that supports recycling food scraps. And we're also, we've been awarding funding to communities that are looking to create more infrastructure to manage food scraps, about $15 million in grants that we awarded in March of 2025 to 9 municipalities and regional entities that are developing food scrap processing capacity and composting infrastructure and facilities that can support regional scale diversion options. That's growing jobs, that's growing economic activity right here in our state. And in the long term, it's going to help us be more sustainable and keep our costs down.
Well, talk about residents. We have a caller here, Catherine Felton, who's calling from Manchester. Catherine, you're on the air.
Hi, nice to speak with you.
Go for it. Tell us what your experience is like composting.
So we have a bucket that we got from the Manchester transfer station, and we are able to fill it and then drop it off at one of 4 locations.
Ooh.
Leftovers, bones, everything. And it's made a huge difference in our ability to compost well. And we love this program.
Well, thanks so much, Catherine, for calling and sharing your experience. And it sounds like a program like that really does make a huge difference. And Commissioner, with Catherine's experience in Manchester, are there other things that individuals can be doing to help out?
Yeah, so just as we think about, food scraps, first off, the number one thing we can do is try to make sure that we're not, we're being thoughtful about not wasting food, right? And or even thinking about donating food. We've provided technical assistance to restaurants around the state that want to rethink their inventory and think about food donation and reusing some of their food, byproducts that they may not, can use into new recipes and find new ways to use some of the more of the parts of the materials that they're purchasing. So reducing and recycling is something that even applies in the case of food scraps. And then if that's not possible, of course, then making sure that we have options to divert those food scraps from the waste stream is really important. Some people are really excited about backyard composting, for example, and that works really well. But what the caller just described is something that's also really attractive, which is having a curbside or a collection program means that you could put more materials like meat and bones and things like that don't really work well with your backyard composting pile. You can divert all those materials too. And one of the great things about it, and I'm myself, my home, we do a curbside collection program, is that it actually gets that stinky stuff out of your trash. You're actually generating a lot less trash, and it doesn't. It's not as much of an attractant for animals and that sort of thing. And so it's really remarkable to see how much food scrap diversion can reduce the amount of trash that you're producing. And that's what generates the savings, frankly.
Well, and it's interesting to see how this has grown because I feel like I've been recycling all my life, but it wasn't until fairly recently. When I say recently, it's like the last couple of years / decade where there's a lot of movement here to do the separations or just education on, if you don't do this, actually, it creates a lot of strain on local infrastructure. What will it take for Connecticut to move further ahead, to leapfrog ahead?
Well, I think my view is this is a long-term process, and like I said, it's gonna, the solutions and what works for New Haven is going to be different for what works for Kent, for example. And so we're really excited to be with this Sustainable Materials Management grant funding to be supporting these different approaches that meet the needs and the priorities of different communities. And I think over time, as we're supporting more communities that are trying out these pilots and then transitioning them to permanent programs, I think that just becomes contagious, and we'll have proven models that other communities and areas want to adopt. Also, this is something where we see a lot of regional collaboration too. So as you see certain towns are developing approaches, then their neighboring towns may be able to piggyback on some of the investments that they're making in collection infrastructure, for example.
Right.
So that's really exciting too.
Basically see what works for each city, and then other cities can start adopting because it's working.
You bet. Yeah. And part of course, there's a cost to diverting food scraps and, creating the infrastructure to collect it and get it to the right place where it can be recycled here in the state. And so we're, through our materials management infrastructure grants, that $15 million that we awarded, we're helping to towns develop the kind of sorting facilities that then take that waste from your curb and get that food waste, food scraps to the right place where it can be recycled.
Well, this is a perfect transition to another caller here. Recycling is certainly at the forefront of our minds. A caller, Bud, calling in from New London. Bud, you're on the air.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. It's Dr. Bud. Long time no see. Thank you for all you do. You guys are doing amazing work there, and it would be nice if we got some help from the federal government once in a while. But what I have been advocating for, I represent New London in recycling, and I would like to see a creative reuse recycling center underneath the bridge. So the big picture, having curbside recycling, but also having neighborhood recycling, and then to have the creative reuse recycling in New London. It's the transportation, it's the intermodal transportation center underneath the bridge, the highway, railroad, and boating all come together there. And there's an organization called FINE, Farms Institutions New England. And I want to bring that together with, fine dining, the fine art of recycling. And there's already an organization, volunteers in New London, who are composting, and that's going back into the gardens. So having seven or 8 different categories of recycling at the curbside, which seems like a lot, but in Japan there's actually 47 items that can be recycled at the curbside, and have people being rewarded for taking their compost and all their recycling to a neighborhood or to a regional recycling center. And thank you for what you're doing. Keep up good work. You have a great day.
Oh, that's super.
Thank you so much, Bud, for calling with all that. And actually, we heard from Captain earlier, different city, different place. So it's really exciting to see different areas there's all these programs. But like Bud said, it could be a little overwhelming. What are your thoughts about single streaming or any just ideas of how to make this a little easier? And also, Bud mentioned incentives. That's an interesting
so that is a huge point. One of the most powerful incentives that we see working in communities is something called unit-based pricing. When you think about it, if you're paying for the cost of waste disposal, let's say, in your property taxes, everybody's paying the same amount. And so if you are someone who's recycling a lot, you don't generate a lot of trash, but your neighbor isn't doing those types of things, you're paying the same cost, right? Even though you as a more robust recycler, there, it's going to cost less to divert or to send your materials for disposal. So unit-based pricing is a longstanding, proven policy that basically allocates the cost of waste disposal based on how much you throw away, and that creates a powerful incentive to reward people who are recycling and doing more diversion and reducing the burden of waste disposal on the community. And we've seen that there's several towns that have adopted unit-based type or pay-as-you-throw type programs. It can look a lot of different in different communities, but that combined with a organics diversion program really is like a huge incentive to help achieve significant reduction in the amount of trash that has to be disposed of per capita. So savings that we've seen from pilot towns that have been piloting these approaches have topped $8.5 million per year. We think we'd save about $113 million per year if every community in the state adopted that type of program. That's real dollars that could be used for something, like schools and recreation and things that really improve quality of life. But in the meantime, we've seen that food scrap diversion, pay-as-you-throw, it doesn't require major lifestyle changes, just simple sorting, like Bud mentioned. And it can produce real and measurable savings for towns and residents. And residents are consistently reporting to us surprised at how much less trash they generate and how easy the system becomes once they try it. It just requires, being open to something new. And it's exciting to see, all across the state, we hear from folks like Bud and Catherine. Sometimes we have recycling coordinators at the municipal level. We have sustainability task forces in different towns, or just individual residents or restaurants or businesses. We find champions in all different places around the state, and we're excited with this funding that we've been able to help support them. And that I have to credit to just tremendous leadership from the legislature, from the Environment Committee, and Governor Lamont. It's been great to see this willingness to support this level of state incentives to help communities and folks like Bud develop the kinds of solutions that will work for them.
Well, we'll have to catch up with you maybe same time next year and see how that program is doing, and
you bet.
And how much improvement we've made in a year.
Yeah. And in the meantime, as folks are gathering around that Thanksgiving table, this is a great time to think about the food that you're consuming and opportunities to reuse those leftovers, of course, and think about new solutions to dispose of what you can't, recycle what you can't use. And I also want to give a plug for the What's In, What's Out app. A lot of debates around the table about what can be recycled and how to recycle right. And this is an app that we have that you can find and help to solve all your questions about what can go in the blue bin. So thanks so much for this great conversation.
That's always a good question. And coming back from the break, we'll talk more beyond leftovers and what you can do with food waste. You've been listening to Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Commissioner Katie Dykes. Commissioner, always a pleasure.
Great to be with you.
So after the break, we will hear from a recipient of the Sustainable Materials Management Grant that we mentioned earlier, someone who will help us break down why waste is such a complex issue. Are you composting, recycling, or let us know how are you doing your part to minimize waste? We would love to know what you're doing, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. We all create waste every single day. Even those who have mastered the art of making homemade chicken stock from vegetable scraps are probably tossing out a banana peel or onion skin from time to time. And all that waste adds up. But organizations across the state are working hard to divert it through recycling, composting, and other methods. Joining me now is the leader of one of those organizations, Jennifer Heaton-Jones. She's the executive director for the Housatonic Resources Recovery Authority, or HRRA, which is a regional solid waste and recycling management organization for the Housatonic Valley. Thank you so much, Jen, for being with us today.
Thank you.
So can you tell us about this recovery authority? What is the organization doing, working to accomplish here?
Yeah, well, right now we are focusing on organics, food scraps, and we are working towards creating more access for our residents so that they are able to drop off easily, more conveniently, to ensure that those food scraps are composted and we put it back into the earth and give our soil more nutrients.
And so which towns are covered by HRRA? Can you name a few?
Sure, I can go alphabetical. So we're Bethel and Brookfield, Bridgewater, Kent, Danbury, New Fairfield, New Milford, Newtown, Weston, Wilton, Ridgefield, Reading.
So quite a large area of space. And I would imagine that one of the struggles in waste management is getting larger generators of waste like grocery stores, hotels, and restaurants to do their part. Because we've been talking about individual homes earlier. Is that true in your experience?
It's very difficult to get the large generators to participate. There is a state law that requires large generators. It's been a statute for nearly a decade. So if you produce now just a half a ton of material a week, you are required by state law to separate those organics and ensure that they are composted. Yet, though we have this law, the large generators are not complying with that statute. So we're working to educate them and partner with other organizations to ensure that they understand what needs to happen, how the law works, and what are their resources.
And how is that conversation going? I imagine there's so many moving parts, as we've heard earlier. Just the idea of recycling, there are so many things to consider when you're doing that. And I think at the same time, while you're having these conversations, you're also asking businesses to propose a solution to this, right?
Yes, we are asking them to be a part of the solution. So a significant amount of our waste, I think Commissioner Dykes covered it well, we produce 3.5 million tons of waste every year. Out of that, 25 to 30% of our solid waste stream is organics. And so when you're talking 875,000 to 1 million tons of waste a year alone is organics. And the large generators have such a significant impact, we need them to be a part of the solution.
And can you talk about those impacts? What happens when you don't compost, or what happens when you do compost?
Right. So, when we don't compost, it's going to either a waste-to-energy plant or it's being shipped hundreds of miles out of state to a landfill. So we have significant environmental impact, a negative impact to our environment. And, food waste is mostly water. And so it's not efficient to incinerate it. We are sending our waste to incinerators to create energy to put back into the grid. It's not very efficient. But more importantly is that our food waste has a lot of value, and we don't really want to call it waste. We don't want to call it food waste. We call it food scraps, organics. And it has value. It's a resource. It can be made into compost. We can put it back into our soils. And, our food is only as nutritious as the soil that we grow it. So we can make a significant impact by removing that food waste or food scraps from our waste stream and utilizing it as a resource.
And so for anyone who isn't sure where to begin, where would you suggest them to start with?
Because everyone has different resources at home. Maybe you live in a rural community and you can backyard compost, but you don't know how. You can reach out to the HRA. We teach backyard composting, so we like to start there because it's free, right, to backyard compost. Maybe you don't have the resources of a backyard, so there are waste haulers who will collect at the curb and pick up your organics. Maybe you don't have the resources to pay for the curbside. So many of our municipalities in the HRA, we have 9 municipal drop-off programs, and we have 20 satellite smart bins that collect our food scraps. And so the residents can utilize those free drop-off programs to drop off their scraps. And then we as municipalities are making compost from that material.
Well, it sounds like more and more people are either becoming aware that composting is something that we should do, or they've been composting for a long time. I feel like it's all over the place. But if every person in the state starts to compost tomorrow, what kind of impact would that have?
Well, I would go back to some of the data that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So we would have a significant impact for waste reduction. It would look like about 1 million tons of waste removed, or food scraps removed from the waste stream. And we would see a significant carbon footprint reduction in transportation. You start to taking the look at the math of 3.5 million tons of waste and what it takes, how many trucks that it takes on the roads of Connecticut to transport that material, and then either in-state or out-of-state, you're starting to look at a significant environmental impact.
And it sounds like, too, there's a lot of things that people can do. There's also a lot of collaboration between your organization, HRA, and the state. So can you talk about what that interaction has been like? In your experience, is there anything the state could be doing to support your efforts more effectively? Goes both ways, right?
Yes, it does go both ways. I would love to see the state provide more policy to support initiatives for more enhanced unit-based pricing, more of those mandates across the state, create incentives for residents to want to reduce their waste. I would also love to see the state support and fund the Recycle CT Foundation. And that foundation was created by state statute. It's Public Act 1494. And the mission of the Recycle CT Foundation is very similar to the HRA, but our mission at the Recycle CT Foundation is to support the mission is to support enhancing more public education for material management in reuse, waste reduction, recycling, and composting. It is a nonprofit. And the state could be continuing to help support that. It is a great tool that the state has, but it's really dull, and we need them to help us sharpen it.
Well, I think a lot of people are wanting to know or show what we can all do. And so we have Erin from New Haven who is commenting that Erin just wants us to make sure that the idea of food recovery is mentioned as well to help reduce the waste at the source, which at the supermarket. And so this is actually something that we'll be talking about in our next segment, Erin. But Jen, any response to what Erin has to say? Because food recovery is also a part of this process.
Absolutely, and we love to teach that in our schools. We start with our youth. I wish that we could also see that at the state level to have the state support this as a state curriculum, not just in the textbooks, but also for them to practice it. And part of that is for the children to recognize how much food is wasted that could be given to their peers. They could be taking it home, putting it in their backpacks, and it not going into the waste stream. So we could start there. Certainly, grocery stores that have ugly fruits and vegetables that didn't sell, and ensure that they are donated to a local food pantry. There's so many different initiatives that we could create, public-private partnerships to ensure that there's less wasted food.
And then clearly there's a lot of passion about this topic, as we've heard from both our guests and our callers this morning. And this is kind of a big but obvious question here, but why does it matter that we're having this conversation, that people are reacting to it?
Oh gosh, isn't it obvious? Well, every single day, you mentioned it in the beginning, every person creates waste every day, and it has to be managed. It has to go somewhere. Waste is very complex, so it's going to create, it requires a complex answer. But at the same time, it can be just as simple as one step, and that is taking out your food scraps and removing them from the waste stream, or not wasting food that could be provided to someone else who might be hungry. Those are easy steps, and change is hard. And we are challenged by that at the HRA to educate the public and inspire them and empower them to make change in their lives. And let's just start with one simple change when it comes to the waste stream. Let's start with food scraps. It's the low-lying fruit, right? Let's pick it and do something with it.
You've been listening to Jennifer Heaton-Jones, who's the Executive Director for the Housatonic Resources Recovery Authority. Jen, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
After the break, we move from waste management to food recovery. We'll talk with two Connecticut-based organizations whose mission it is to get good food into the hands of people who need it. Have you donated it to a local food bank? Tell us about your experience. 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Refed, a nonprofit that tracks food waste, estimates that around $550 million worth of food will go into waste this Thanksgiving alone. Meanwhile, families across Connecticut and the nation are struggling to afford groceries. This hour, we're exploring how hunger and waste can exist side by side and what's being done to fix it. Joining me now are two Connecticut experts tackling food waste head on. Lori Martin is the co-founder and executive director of Haven's Harvest. That's an environmental organization dedicated to food recovery and redistribution. Lori, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Karen Sajazi, who's the Fairfield County Co-Site Director for Food Rescue US. Karen, thanks for being on the show as well.
Appreciate you having me. Thanks.
And for our listeners, let us know if you have a question about food recovery efforts. And are you looking to get involved? Let us know, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Lori, SNAP benefits are set to resume, which is a comfort for many food insecure families across the state. But can you tell us about this last month at Haven's Harvest? Did the uncertainty impact your work?
Oh, certainly it did. The numbers of people calling, either organizations, schools, adult daycare centers, faith communities. We had lots of calls from new organizations looking for food from us.
And it sounds like there's a lot of pressure to show up for that.
It's true. There is a lot of pressure. I mean, the questions are not unknown. They're a usual part of the work. The calls have been coming in even from the beginning of the year, but over the last course of the month, it's been really, it's hard. In particular, I would say it's hard to sit with the knowledge, and I'm sure Karen experiences this too, knowing that we still have so much good food going to waste in our state, and we have people in such great need. And I think Karen would agree. I mean, basically, it's a structural failure of the food system that this exists, and I'm grateful to be working with Food Rescue US to be filling that gap.
Karen, I imagine you might have the same responses, having this moment of food insecurity weighing on your mind.
Oh, that's the best way to put it. It's an overwhelming sense of responsibility. There's just, the food is out there, and working hard to get it to the people who need it. And hearing such an incredible increase and confusion, fear, and desperation on the part of a lot of people, it's a very challenging piece of our work.
And did worries about SNAP benefits, Karen, lead to any more interest from people in the community, maybe even volunteers?
Oh, definitely. I guess a silver lining is that over the span of the week leading into November 1st and the cuts to SNAP, or the loss of SNAP, we saw a 165% increase in new volunteers just in 1 week alone. So it's also heartening and hopeful to know that other people share our sentiment of deep concern and willingness to help.
And Lori, help me paint a picture about how much edible food is thrown away in Connecticut.
22% of what's in our waste stream is food. And so a portion of that is edible food that Karen and I work diligently to keep out of the waste stream. Yes.
And how does Havens Harvest work to change that?
Actually, can I just finish the other pieces that,
Yes.
according to Connecticut Deep, we're only capturing 5 to 10% of the edible food out of the waste stream thus far. And so we've got a long way to go. And so part of, I guess, what I'd like to say is also that it needs to be consideration around public infrastructure, because it is the gap that we're filling in the food system. And so how Havens Harvest does it, it's similar to what Karen does, is that we connect our donors, food donors, with organizations. And we use an app, and we schedule runs in an app. And so primarily the food is moved directly from food donor to a nonprofit partner. So not only, though, food pantries and soup kitchens, but also other partners, clinics and faith communities and libraries and I'm trying to think of what else, public schools, actually, and other schools, other sites around the city and beyond around the state. And because partly soup kitchens and food pantries are not always necessarily open and available to accept the food when the food is available, or they may not have enough cold storage, or simply the food needs to be eaten because it's sandwiches after an event. And so we are able to share it, perhaps even with subsidized housing sites where there are 50 or 100 people to eat the food immediately. So the food that we capture is perhaps good today, tomorrow, but may not even be good the day after. And so that's what we work with, perishable food. That's what we're focused on.
And you mentioned infrastructure earlier. What are some of the infrastructure that you're seeing exists, and what are you thinking that needs to be better?
In particular, and we're not the only ones, although we've been saying it for a few years, that we need to create food recovery hubs. Other people use sort of different words, but a hub where there's ample cold storage, because basically cold storage gives food life a bit longer, right? So either in just coolers or in freezers. So that's part of the thing we can see imagining in different areas of the state, so that there is ample cold storage. And then also buildings, and of course, right, green buildings, I would say, for warehouses, and green vehicles, right? We need vehicles to help move some of the food. We use lots of volunteers, and we appreciate them. We coordinate with other organizations, but the flow and efficiency would be greater if we had some of our own vehicles to help move that along. And also, like, strong, I was just talking to Commissioner Dykes, actually, but some investment in technology, and then the jobs that we create are green jobs. Right? These are part of supporting the environment. And so those are the pieces of infrastructure that we see: technology, buildings, jobs, and vehicles.
So usually I think issues like this, it goes beyond the issue that we're talking about right before us. It's so interconnected. And Karen, curious to hear, how does Food Rescue US work to curb this problem as well?
So very similar to the way that Lori works at Havens Harvest. We connect food donors and the food that they're willing to donate to social service agencies throughout the community through our network of volunteers. The food we rescue is provided by our network of volunteers at no cost to our agency partners, which allows them to stretch their limited resources in a time when funding has been cut for a lot of those agencies. And provide high quality fresh food to individuals and families who are food insecure, and many of whom rely on them for the food on a recurring basis. It's a direct transfer model. It's very nimble. Very often the food that is collected from a food donor gets to its location in less time it takes than for you to get your groceries home. And so, we're very focused on food safety. But at the end of the day, we sit at this intersection of food waste and food insecurity. So we're also trying to really build community through what we do and connect donors within a community with the agencies right in that community so they feel like they are serving their immediate surrounding community.
So it sounds like there's so much community work, of course, a lot of collaboration, but education is also sprinkled into this process. And we just spoke with Jen Heaton-Jones from the Housatonic Resources Recovery Authority earlier. And Jen mentioned that public education is a challenge in her work. So Karen, is that a challenge that you see in your work as well?
It definitely is. There are a lot of misconceptions surrounding food recovery and being able to actually repurpose surplus food. Most of that is just that, a myth. It is not illegal. There are actually quite a few protections in place on the federal level. The Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act and the later Food Donation Act also protect the people who are donating food against any liability. But generally, schools, which Jen Heaton-Jones touched on, are such a great place to start. They function in two ways for us, both as food donors and also as agencies. So, there are many schools who have pantries that we serve to serve their kids, and they are able to visit those pantries at the end of the week, so they have food over the weekend. But at the same time, most of the commissary kitchens, or at least individual kitchens within the school, will donate their surplus, and that pushes out from there either to after-school programs, homeless shelters, all that great prepared food. But at the same time, we do a lot of education programs within schools and partner with different programs within schools to teach about food waste and food recovery and food insecurity, which happens to be actually a favorite part of my job. I love doing those and getting kids out on rescues so that they can really start at a young age appreciating what they have and what others don't, and how to really, in a very relatively simple way, make a very big difference.
Well, Lori, I'm seeing you nodding to what Karen just shared, but also it's one of those things where it's great to have these conversations today as the issues are sort of looming before us. But we've also had conversations from people where we needed to do this way before something happens. So clearly the public education portion is a part of it. But what are your thoughts about that? The idea of let's not wait until something is happening, then have this conversation, because by the point that happens, then it's too late.
Right. That's spot on. I would say, what Food Rescue US and Havens Harvest share is that we are logistical geniuses. And in terms of the redirection, right, there's still excess food on one side of the school system food, and there are children who still need it, and there's excess food at the schools. And that's the part of the system that we are bringing to light, really, and have been for over a decade. And so just as you said, this is not this month's issue. It's been a long time issue. And the work that we also do is regenerative. So it's different than when we're just going out the way food banks purchase food, that we create a relationship with our donors and we maintain that relationship with our donors, and then the food keeps flowing. And it is still about relationships. It's about relationships with the donor, but it also is part and parcel, I think, with education, which is what Karen somewhat said is part of what the education is, even to our donors. We can still take milk with today's date on it, with expiration date, because the date labeling actually is still a bit of a gray area, although there is a push to standardize date labels. If it's not bloated, swollen, greasy, slimy, green, food can still be consumed. And so we do have that in our country, easily toss it out rather than testing it with our own personal senses, looking, tasting, feeling. And that is still part of education. So we do that on the donor side, but also our partner side. And Karen, I know I'm sure you do that too. It's explain, these cans, maybe have for instance, when we get canned food, which we don't focus on, but it may have last month's date on it, that can of beans is still good. And so there's a lot of education around that, so that people understand that food can still be happening.
Well, And it sounds like there's a lot of people who have been doing this for a while and a lot of people who this is a new thing for them. And it's just want to share a comment from Lynn from Durham. Lynn wanted to shout out to some places that are doing their part. There are restaurants who compost, like Perk on Main in Middletown, which has been composting for 15 to 20 years.
Good on them.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lynn, for sharing that with us. And it's great to hear stories like that, right, where people have been doing this for a while. So are you hopeful that you're working towards even more restaurants like Perk on Main to do their part?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we just launched an initiative, No Waste Full Plates 2030, and we'd like to move the state towards a zero food waste place. And it's doable, it's scalable, and we can get it accomplished with some public investment to scale up the work.
And Karen, kind of a similar question to you in terms of furthering or scaling up the work. How could the state further your mission?
Well, I think having the state focus on better policy surrounding food waste, whether it's just from improving upon our existing commercial organics recycling law and expanding that to include a more mandated approach to food recovery, all the way to tax incentives. I mean, incentives go a long way to make people do something. So if we could get some benefits beyond, the ones that we all see, but some really finite benefits for some of these organizations, that would be fantastic. And I think just really, I think the state should step up as really recognizing the need for a greater focus on food in the state. We should have a state food office in the executive branch. We should be establishing the right to food in this state as a human right. So I think a shift of focus of how we're viewing food in general might help give it greater value at every level.
And Lori, what about you? What are some hopes that you would like to see as we continue this food recovery process and build this landscape?
Well, I totally agree with what Karen said, and we sit on a state task force to move those issues forward. It's one of the things we say is everybody with a mouth deserves food in the same way that food's a human right. And I would just talk to Commissioner Dykes as she left. The state has invested in anaerobic digestion and composting on state levels, but the highest and best use of food is still keeping the food in the food system, and we haven't given that attention in the same way. We haven't given attention and funding that it really needs, and I think years ago, beyond maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I think it was something to prove, like, could this be done? But in fact, both the organizations have proven this. So investment in that kind of work can really move the needle.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of hope to continue this work, and we asked this of Jen earlier. If it can get overwhelming. So for those who want to start, where should they start? And Karen, any advice on where should people start if they feel overwhelmed by all the information?
Well, I think start at home. Think about the food you're purchasing or the food that you have, right? Make a list when you go to the grocery store. Try to be less wasteful in your own home to begin with. If you go to a restaurant and you don't eat your whole meal, bring what's left home. Have it for lunch the next day. And I think we need to, start thinking about food as the valuable resource that it is for everyone. And keeping it as a valuable resource instead of a harm in our state. When we've had a 40% increase in food insecurity in Connecticut since 2020, and at the same time we've had an increase in our amount of waste, something's wrong and broken. And so we need to start reversing that. But I think, stop wasting so much at home. If you can't eat it, compost it, and at the same time support agencies that do this. Volunteering with Havens Harvest and Food Rescue US are simple, rewarding way to spend maybe an hour of your day, and it really makes a huge impact in people's lives.
Well, thank you so much for that. Sounds like we can all start small and then work towards the bigger steps. You've been listening to Karen Sajazi, who's the Fairfield County Co-Site Director for Food Rescue US. Karen, appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
You are also listening to Lori Martin, who's the co-founder and executive director of Havens Harvest. Lori, appreciate you coming on the show today as well.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Chloe Nguyen. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening.